And oh wow, we are not live. Actually, there is a problem. We're live on a couple of systems, but not all of them. Let me see here. Let me see if I can fix this. Bear with me one moment, and maybe we can get this all fixed. Okay, we are all set. We are fully live. Sorry about the hiccup there for you YouTubers and Facebook folks. Today I'm live with Annie Hodges, who has just joined the Voltage Control team. Pretty excited about that. So great to have you, Annie. And today we are going to be talking about slowing down, making room for innovation. I always like to say, if you create space, innovation rushes in. And Anna, you were making a pretty keen insight around this idea that if we're trying to shift mindsets, we're also trying to adopt a bunch of new behaviors at the same time, or add a bunch of new, I would say, things to our to-do list. They might be counterproductive, or they might go fight against each other.
Totally. Yes. Well, thanks so much for having me. And this is something I think a lot about when I'm facilitating and designing workshops and working with folks about how do we just put in more spaces, even within our busy days, right? Maybe it's just a moment at the beginning to breathe together, or a moment to stretch, or the moment for reflection. It's all about, we're actually trying to change these behaviors that we've been taught over the course of our lifetime. It's going to take a lot of time to unlearn them as well. So to provide that space is just really imperative.
So you mentioned unlearning. Why is that so important? Like, maybe for those who haven't thought much about unlearning, what does that conjure up?
Yeah, well, I feel like, our school systems do a lot of things really well, and they do some things that maybe no longer serve us. And a lot of them lead to really looking to authority for the answers, looking to our teachers. What do we need to do? How long is it going to take us? What's expected of me? And when it comes to innovation and creativity and changing our mindsets to be thinking about the future, things are so complex that we don't have an authority figure to look to. And so we have to kind of unlearn those things and take off those layers so we can begin to look to ourselves, to our peers, for creative solutions in all the uncertainty that we're facing right now.
Yeah, it's interesting too that this came up, because often when I'm asked to speak about design sprints, I'll frame it from the perspective of, we need to slow down to speed up, because one of the I would say the most prominent sources of pushback is we don't have enough time to do this, right? It's just like, hey, we just don't we can't afford to have 7 people in a room for 5 days. And it's like it's pretty short-sighted. And as far as with when they're doing the calculus, they're not thinking about the momentum and all the progress they'll make. They much rather just like kind of painfully like struggle through the status quo and the way things are have been done historically, and then get to the end and realize there's a bunch of assumptions and mistakes, and versus taking a moment to hit the reset button and just survey the landscape so they can do a better, they can make better decisions.
Yeah, it's all about front loading the work. And I mean, I have a lot of compassion to people that, again, we're not taught to front load the work. We're taught to get things done by a certain time. We're taught to move ahead and to keep meeting our deadlines and our quotas. And so to front load is going against another way of unlearning. But we can't actually get to problem solving without spending so much time on the beginning, really figuring out what problem are we working on.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think a lot of folks have experienced waterfall. And for listeners who don't know much about waterfall, it's this idea that, like, let's plan everything and figure out all the requirements before we launch this thing, or before we even build it. And And instead it's proven that, hey, let's iterate our way there and learn as we go and try things and whatnot. But I think the trap people fall into is we can't just go iterate on just a bunch of assumptions. Like we have to have some clear understanding of like why we're even attempting to do anything.
Yeah, I feel like this always comes up when we're dealing with complex problems, right? It's like if you have a simpler problem that you're dealing with that has kind of a cause and effect, then you can kind of plan ahead and you can figure out what you're going to do next. Most businesses don't have those problems. So they're just, you have to re-navigate, okay, how do we solve in such complexity when we are just like dealing with all the ambiguity and we don't know what's going to happen next. So you really just have to test it out to then see what could even happen to know how to plan from there. And it's really uncomfortable and it's messy and it requires a whole new set of skills that I think are, the industry is just now kind of getting into and learning and trying to prioritize.
Yeah, I might add some nuance there, which is like I think the businesses do have those problems. It's just they also have complex problems, right? And so we have a new skill that we need to develop, which is our ability to assess the type of problem we're walking into so that we use the right tools. And I think therein lies the problem, right? It's like people think they can go solve complex problems using tools that are more suited for complicated or simple problems.
And
And
even yeah, I think even like a set of complicated problems can become complex when you're dealing with the workforce at large, right?
yeah,
So I think it's more like businesses in their kind of meta strategic levels don't have a lot of just complicated versus complex problems.
yeah, if you decompose it and look at it in a vacuum, yes, maybe, but once you start looking at all the interdependencies and how things relate and cause effect relationships, it starts to get fairly uncertain and emergent. And when those,
Especially when we're dealing with people, right? Like the
yeah,
people on the teams and the diversity of thought and experience and communication style. I feel like that's where it really gets very complex.
certainly the types of stuff that we walk into day in and day out are 100% in that land of complexity, and I think it's important to keep these things in mind for sure. So I guess what have you been noticing lately that kind of gives you like the most excitement or the most hope?
I guess I just feel that it's really catching on, this idea of, I'm seeing a lot more, articles and blogs and people just talking about this need to rest and relax. And I even heard about this company that is changing their winter, their how they work with their employees in the winter to slow down to kind of match the seasons and just how humans, naturally are. And we're just looking at natural systems and trying to mimic, do more biomimicry, which I just think is a really healthy trend. We're moving towards more resilient protocols that are helping us just be more harmonious in our own, natural ways of being.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. This idea of, because when we do work with teams around facilitation and crafting experiences, we often ask them to think about kind of cyclical or biomimicry, or how can you borrow from nature to think about structure or how to align whatever you're creating. And so, these are just nice design heuristics. And so it's kind of pretty cool that they're using the seasons as a tool to think about like replenishment or just that cyclical nature of how we work.
Yeah, we could even think about it in our own planning tools, right? How do we have the winter and the summer and the spring seasons of the plan? And I think that there's a nice overlay there. And I've also learned a lot about this from the permaculture principles and
Mm.
how well they can be used in, social and business containers, and how there's just a lot of great ways that we can learn from one area of development, like in agriculture, and bring it into our workplaces.
Yeah, and it strikes me too as these models can be applied at different levels of granularity. we don't have to necessarily say, oh, it's winter, we got to apply the winter principles. It's like, oh, it's winter, we let's practice winter on Wednesdays or whatever, right? Like we can whatever suits us and where we're at in the journey.
Yeah, we can always experiment with just remembering that these things exist, right?
Mhm.
Remembering that there's cycles to things, and we even have that within our days, right? We have our winter time of the day when we maybe take 10 minutes in the afternoon and we're feeling a little slower. Um, so yeah, of course, I think there's so many great ways to use this in the micro and the macro as well.
Yeah, it's kind of fun just to think about how our days are structured, and so often, I think we become victims of the environment, or what other people threw on our calendars, and being conscious about what our needs are as individuals, what our needs are as a team, and articulating those. I think so often folks don't. Well, it's the meme of. Uh, this is a meeting about a meeting and that being a terrible thing. I love meetings about meetings.
Those are the
That's
best.
design great meetings. It's like when we try to do something else and we just have a meeting about a future meeting, or let's come back on this, then we probably failed because we didn't plan that meeting, right? And
I
so, yeah.
I was gonna ask, what do you do in your day? How do you hold off? I know how busy you are, seeing your
Mm.
schedule. How do
Yeah,
you
yeah.
make time for rest? What's your
Well, my big thing is, all my mornings start off with exercise and sauna, and it's that's precious time that is not allowed to be interrupted. Which was a lot easier before the pandemic because we didn't have these global clients expecting crazy time zone shifts and whatnot, right? And
Yep.
so, if something creeps in on that protected time, and it seems like a fun project that's worth doing on a team that needs help, then I might make exceptions, but there's always something that gets moved around, so that that time is honored, and so that's my big thing. And then I also block out time that I know is most effective for different purposes. Like I know that I'm most effective at task oriented stuff, like um, later in the afternoon or early evening, and so I've got that blocked off, and I might take off um, and go for a walk or check out, and but when I get back, that that late afternoon time or early evening, just like sink into some, just that's good email time.
I love how your like winter part of your day is like spent in the sauna. It's so poetic. It really
Oh
works.
yes, yes. It's funny, the heat is regenerative.
Hmm.
Um, I love it. It's funny. I was just meeting a friend for lunch the other day, and we sat outside, and he was like, "Man, it's getting really hot," and I was like, "Really?" I don't
See,
even notice.
you're preparing for the
I
Texas
know. It's like,
summer.
I don't know. No big deal, man.
That's so wonderful. I'm really glad that you create that space for yourself. I know how important that is for your whole team that you do that.
So, how about you? What are your rituals for reserving time?
Yeah, I mean, I right now I'm kind of centering all of mine around gardening. I've just
And
kind of gotten into having a green thumb. I originally thought that I couldn't, that I was one of those just people that just was never going to, and I decided to break that limiting belief. So yeah, I garden at my sister's house, who's like 3 minutes away from me, and my house. So I basically take breaks to water, see how the plants are doing, see which one needs more water than others, and it's just something that gets me outside every day, spend time in the sun, and it's something external. So it's like something that is I need to do to take care of something. So it helps. It forces me to do it. I can't be like not today, especially when it's like 100 degrees here in North Carolina and the plants are thirsty. So
yeah, well, North Carolina is a great place to get into gardening because it has plants tend to like the soil and the environment. So
Yes.
um,
There's so much water.
yes. Texas is a little more unforgiving, but my wife makes it happen. She works at an organic gardening store, and I've thought a lot about how gardening is such a great metaphor for facilitation because we can't tell the plants to grow. We can't say, "Hey, plant, like grow," but we can certainly create conditions where they're more likely to thrive, and we can encourage them to go in certain directions, etc.
And I love that because it's like also the conditions we set are different for all plants. Like I used to start out by just watering all my plants the same, right? And I
Yeah,
learned that that's not how it works.
some soil wants alkaline, or some plants want alkaline
Yeah.
soils, some want acidic.
Yeah, and to make like potent medicinal herbs, you actually want them to be in really extreme conditions. You want them to have bad soil and be near rocks. And, I think that's also like some people. Some people thrive really well when conditions are tough, and other people need it to be a softer experience.
I love that. Yeah, it's such a good metaphor for, I think, leadership and facilitation. And fantastic that you've gotten into gardening. So very cool. Well, we are definitely at our 15-minute mark, so I'm gonna shut us down for today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Annie, and we will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Douglas.